In this tutorial, we're going to create a menu that will allow you to click between several sites. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to collapse this and I'm going to drag site 1 underneath. And I'm going to duplicate this twice. You can press Ctrl D or Command D, or you can right click here and do duplicate. I'm going to call this my site 3. This is going to be my site Forest. And these are just the names of what's going to be there, just to make it easy for me to see what's there. So to do this, we're going to need to make more materials. I'm just going to duplicate again here, this twice. First one, I'm going to right click, I'm going to rename it Forest 360, and then I'm going to drag my forest image onto it, and then I'm going to drag that up onto the forest site. Next, I'm going to go here and I'm going to turn this one into Mine 360. Put a 3D image of the mine over here and drop it onto the mine site. And we now have 3 different sites. They're all on top of each other, but that's okay. Let's select them all and hide them. Next up, we're going to go to UI and we're going to pick Canvas. So this canvas is basically where we're going to draw our menu. We want to change a couple of things here. We want to go to screen space camera. We want to maximize this and drop our main camera over here. Now to look at this, you'll want to look at it from the back view. Click on it, and if you just press the F button while holding over it, it'll zoom into it. So you want your mouse to be over the scene when you push the F, but you want the canvas to be selected, and it'll just put it up into your screen nicely in the center. Now we're going to need to add a few things to this UI. First thing we're going to do is we're going to grab an image, and that's going to be our background. And I'm just going to grab an image and put it on top of it. So I'm going to just drag this image in. And again, you can pick any image you want. And I'm going to put it actually into my sprites folder. And so I just drag that in from Explorer, even though you can't see it. I'm going to click on the leaves image. And I'm going to choose it as a sprite and hit apply. And now I can drag these leaves into here. You can see they're kind of warped. So I'm going to push the preserve aspect button, and I'm going to use this tool, which is the rect tool, just to pull it out and make it way bigger. So I've got leaves everywhere. And that's just going to be a little background of my piece. And then these little white triangles, I'm just going to drag them to the corners. These white triangles determine how the image stretches depending on how the screen resolution changes. I tend to find that in this situation, putting them to the corners of the screen works really well. So next up, I'm going to add another image. I'm just going to put this across the top. That's going to be my title. And again, these white triangles I'm going to throw to the corners. I'm going to go over here. I'm just going to select a kind of, that green kind of suits me. So this image is my background. And this image is my top bar. You'll notice that the order that they appear here is the order that they're rendered. So if you can't see something, it's probably behind another object. The next UI I'm going to add is a text Mesh Pro. I want you to import the TMP essentials And this text is really easy to work with. It's better than the default text for Unity. I'm going to put my title in here. What should we call it? Let's call it Virtual Tour. And again, with the rect tool selected, I'm going to pull it up. All these triangles to the corners. Then I will like my text to be centered and bold. And these are all the same sorts of things that you would just see in your normal Word program. And now that I've seen that, I actually want to make my top bar just a little bit darker. There we go. So the next thing we're going to need, I'm just going to change that to text title. These changing of names, I'm simply doing just to make it easier for me. You actually don't have to do it. I just find it good practice. So I'm going to add a button, Text Mesh Pro. Now make this a bit bigger. Now if you click out here, you can change what's written on the button. And this is going to be, what's my site one? My site one is going to be my creek, so I'm just going to call it creek. Then I'm going to go back up to my main button. I'm going to drop this button sprite that I have. I'm going to make it the same color using the eyedropper tool at the top. I'm then going to go to my text and make it white. Here I'm going to use the preserve aspect button. I'm just going to pull it up here. That's going to be our first button. Likewise, I'm just putting these little triangles to the corners. So now we have a button and we can make it do something. So you can click on here, and if you had a function, you could drop it into that. So let's make something for that. So let's go to our scripts, create a new script and call it Tour Manager. And we're going to put that script onto the world center in the same place that we have our other script. I didn't mean to add that, so let's just right click and we'll delete that and try and drag that across again. There we go. So we now have on our world center a camera controller and a tour manager. So double click on your tour manager and let's get to coding. So in our tour manager, we're going to need to do a few things to make this work. First thing we're going to need is a list of sites, and these are going to be game objects. And this brackets here means it's an array, which means you can have more than one of them. We're also going to need a main menu so that we can hide it. And finally, we'll need a variable which will tell us how our camera is moving. Now this is a Boolean variable, which means it's true or false. You'll see I've given my variable name an is. It's not a necessary thing, but to me that makes sense. It's like, is the camera move? False, so it's not. Or is the camera moving? True, so it is. You'll notice here I've used public ones rather than private that we've used before, and that's because things outside of this script are going to access these variables. Okay, so first up, we're going to need something to load the sites. So let's go public void load site. And this is going to be the number in this array of the sites that you're loaded. This will become very clear when you start putting the objects in. So we're going to go object sites, send it the site number, and we're going to set it active to true. Then we want to hide the menu. So that's the canvas main menu, .set active, .true. Then the other thing we're going to want to do here is we're going to want to enable the camera. We're going to need to do some more work on this later, but for now, this is all we need. Now we need a function that goes the opposite way. We want to be able to return to our menu. And really all we're going to do here is the opposite of what we did above. So we're going to show the menu. And that's canvas main menu, .set active, true. We're then going to want to hide sites. Now rather than hide the individual site that's loaded so that I have to keep track of it, I'm just going to kind of hit it with a bit of a sledgehammer and I'm just going to deactivate all of the sites. The number of sites that we have, this is absolutely fine to do, but if you had a lot of them, you might want to keep track of it and then just apply the actual number to the site. Oops. So we're going to go do this while I is less than object sites.length, so the number of sites that we have. And this I++ just means add 1 to I every time this loop runs. I'm not going to go into big detail about what a for loop is. I'm sure if you're more interested in that, there's plenty of resources on the Unity site of what these basic variables do. So I'm going to go object sites, and I'm going to pass it I, and I'm going to set active, and I'm going to hide it. Then finally, we're going to disable the camera. So go is camera move. So one more thing, this will load the site at the moment, but we load the site by clicking the button and calling this function, but we have no way to get back. So let's go up here and go if is camera moving, put some braces to put some code and make a little bit of space. And we'll go if input dot get key down, and we're going to go key code dot escape. If you want to do a different key you can, but I just think escape makes sense to me. And if you do that, we'll call return to menu, and then it will call all the code down here. So let's go to Unity and see if this actually all works. Okay, so now back in Unity, if you click on your world center, you'll now see that some of these variables that you've created appeared here. So the first thing is this array of object sites. You're going to want to drop each of your sites over here, and this adds them to the list of sites. Then you want to grab your canvas here for your main menu. And let's actually rename this to canvas main menu so that we know what it is. And make sure that these are deactivated at the moment. And make sure your menu is active. Click on your button. I'm going to call this button break. And here where you had the function that we talked about before, drag the world center into it. Pick your tour manager and pick load site. And 0 is the first one, so that's element 0 as you can see here. Let's press play and click the creek. You get to your creek, you can press the escape button and it goes back to the menu. So we now have the control to the sites. So now it's as simple for this. Let's duplicate this button and duplicate it again. For each button, drag these to each of the corners. I'm going to change this button's name to forest. And down here on the button number, I'm going to change that to 1. And I'll make this one our mine. Change this to 2. Now if I try this, it'll bring me to my different sites. So now all I've got to do is go through here and rename my buttons. And they're not quite evenly apart, which is annoying me a little bit, so I'm just going to drop that down. These away. There we go. So now you have something which allows you to go between the 3 sites. I'm just going to do one more thing before we finish this thing. So now you have the buttons that can go between the 3 sites. Let's go and actually make the camera not rotate while you're on the menu. So let's go back to our camera controller script. The first thing we're going to do up here is we'll create the tour manager. So we'll go here, private tour manager, and I'm just going to call it the same thing but with a lowercase t because you can't use the same name. And when this function starts, what we'll do is we'll go tour manager, we'll get the component which is the tour manager, put it into it. And this means we can now use this to call functions that are in the tour manager and see variables that are in the tour manager. So in our update, I'm going to go if tour manager is camera move. And I'm just going to grab all of this, cut it, paste it. And it's as simple as that. That will now allow whenever that camera is moving, these work. And when it isn't, they don't work. But let's have one more function. Let's do a void reset camera. So that when you go back into each site, all of your zoom and stuff is reset. So this is again a pretty easy thing. But the first thing you're going to do is when you go transform focal ruler angles equals new vector 3, and we'll set it to 0, 0, 0. We're going to set our zoom amount equal to 0, and we'll do this camera main transform position. We'll copy this line and paste it here, and now you can reset the camera. So going back to the tour manager, when we were loading the site here, we want to go get component, and it's a camera controller, and we want to call that reset. So I can't see that reset function, so let's go back to our camera controller. We need to make that public, and remember to save it. And now I should be able to see that. And so now this will nicely reset our camera. So let's test that and see if it works. I made a little mistake in the code. What I actually want here is my tour manager to equal my get component tour manager. Now we can head off and check. Let's press play and test this. I'm going to click on my creek, I'm going to move around, and I'm going to zoom in a bit. I'm going to escape, we go to the forest, and you can see it's all reset. So next up, we'll be adding points of interest. If you just want to have a little tour of your images and that's all you want, you don't need to go any further. But next up, I'll show you how to add points of interest.